Good afternoon and welcome to all our viewers at Live at the Waterhole this afternoon, where we are starting off with the antics of the baboons here at Lentore. And we can see it's quite a busy period of the day with all kinds of grooming going on. Look at those little ones playing around there. I'm Jaapie Potgieter and I will be your host this afternoon. And I'm very excited to see what we have installed this afternoon. Yesterday was extremely interesting, very exciting. You can see these baboons have no shame in front of the camera and they are extremely confident. For a moment there I thought that little one had a bit of a limp. Penelope Kenyon, a good afternoon to you as well. And you also saying hello to Nadine and the Zoomies and everybody else watching. So thank you so much for the good wishes. Let's see, I think this afternoon will be interesting. We can see all of these baboons busy with their own thing. I would like to remind our viewers, this is live and interactive. You can join us in the conversation either on X using hashtag WildEarth, or you can scan the QR code there at the bottom of the screen on the right hand. You can also join us at wildearth.tv/questions, or once again scan the QR code. You can join us at FC on the YouTube channel. And of course you can send through any comments, any questions you might have, or you can let me know what you'd like to chat about, or if you have any interesting things you'd like to share. Have a look, it's quite interesting. See the big male baboon sitting there in the back off to the left in a casual pose, and then how this big one and the female here are so relaxed and just playing and providing a comfortable spot for those little ones. Penelope Kenyon, you're also saying that you are hoping to have a good show before you go off to teach. I'm quite curious to know what you are teaching. Teaching is a very useful tool and extremely important, especially when it comes to environmental factors and conservation. Any environmental education, of course, helps the future generations to develop an appreciation for this beautiful natural world. And I mean, how can you not have an appreciation for a troop of baboons like this? They are highly entertaining. You can see there's one of the other big males chasing a female there. So there's a few females in heat currently in this troop. And that's also ensured some very interesting behavior in this area. Joan Mello, a good afternoon to you, a good Monday afternoon to you, and thank you for wishing all of us here at Wild Earth a good afternoon, as well as Catherine. Hello to you too, Catherine. Roger's asking if baboons and monkeys have the same gestation period. That is a very good question, Roger. I am actually not sure. I guess it would depend on the different species and of monkey. There's obviously quite a lot of different species, and baboon in themselves being an old world monkey. There was a massive sneeze there. You can see it's nice and warm here, the dry dust on the edge of the water. Probably part of the reason why these baboons are so itchy. but there was a huge sneeze. It's always funny to see how baboons react, almost as if it's something that's unknown to them. But just have a look at that. There we see off to the left there's a little one drinking from the mother there, and clearly going at it. Must be very difficult to get some milk out from that teat. It's always a very tough thing being such a young baby baboon. Even though it's at least at that age, you can see the little one, the face is still pink. Yeah. Ooh. The mother coughing there. You can see the cheek swollen up and these huge bulges as she was coughing, probably from the dust kicked up by the other little ones playing around there. But generally for a little baboon at that age, being that young, they're not quite, even though they're very much a part of this troop and very important, and that's why you can see they're playing under the watchful gaze of these large male baboons. But it does provide these little ones with a bit of a carefree period, like the first 2 to 3 months, where these little guys can play around unperturbed and not really open to some displays of what at best can be described as violence or aggression, rather, in the animal kingdom. Interesting though, whenever they do get born, depending on the sex, they are born within some sort of a hierarchy, existing hierarchy within the troop, which will depend on the size of the troop. But at a later stage, the young males, when they get to a certain age, they'll become pushed, and the pressures, the social pressures will be on. Oh, look at that. And that was an interesting maneuver there from a young baboon, trying to get some attention from the larger one. He looks quite content there on the water's edge. And just have a look at these little ones go. They're running between all the different baboons. The big one, and it's amazing actually to watch him be this gentle and careful, not really disturbed by their antics. And you can see, look at that, he's climbing all over and pulling his fur. It's much more organized and respectful. If there's any other older male baboon trying to get some attention, mostly after a certain age they try to stay away from these big ones. So Roger, to get back to your question about the baboon gestation, so baboons generally is about 6 months, actually just a little bit less, which is quite long for a mammal, especially this size. You can see each little, all the younger baboons always have the more energy, where the bigger ones more just posing and sitting, carefully managing the social relations within the troop. But very interesting stuff. Joan Mello, you're saying your buddies the baboons. Indeed they are. They do look like buddies, we can see there's quite a few buddies around here, and they certainly have been extremely entertaining. Let's see how they react to this impala. Interesting, these two species share an interesting bond amongst themselves. They also move together. They both benefit from the presence of the other species in various ways, and it's often in favorable ways. Food and alertness or awareness. But baboons can make it a little bit tricky for impala around the watering holes, not always giving them the due space. And interesting though, I've seen in the past in extreme drought conditions where the relationship kind of changes, especially between these big male baboons like these two we're seeing here in front and the impala. And what happens is these male baboons often might go after some of the younger impala. And actually catch them, kill them and eat them. And I once heard a very interesting comment from somebody, and even though I tried to do a little bit of research, I haven't found much on my side. But I did hear that these baboons tend to develop almost like a craving for vitamin B12 after about 60 days. Not sure where that would have come from, but from what I can see, I do know that they do get some of their nutritional value from meat, eating meat. And of course baboons are omnivores, and even though they have those massive canines that they expose through their yawns every now and again, those are mainly for defense, of course. But they have a varied diet, and they do on occasions eat meat, and I think we sometimes tend to forget that. And just have a look at that. You can see the impala standing there in the background. But what a good start to this afternoon. And I'm sure it looks like these animals are quite relaxed here. They might stay here for a little bit. So in the meantime, let's go check in at Elephant Pan, where I hear there's a little birdie. And then we might come back here a little bit later. Aha! Indeed, what an interesting little birdie, a red-billed teal. This is spectacular. What a beautiful view, and what a beautiful bird. Have a look. It's got its one leg pulled up. Now, judging from the reflection in the water and the movement of it, it looks like it's maybe overcast. Not sure why the bird would have its foot up at this stage, but maybe just resting it. But what a beautiful, beautiful bird. You can see each feather lined with a white outline, and then of course that striking red bill. But what a beautiful bird. can see it looks like there's quite a bit of build-up in the water. Looks like some algae build-up on the side, and I can see what looks like quite a lot of busy flies and ants around, quite a lot of elephant dung. Just have a look. It is on the edge of a pan, so it's the wind blowing everything into the corner. But this is quite unusual for elephant pan. Usually I see an elephant at elephant pan. I would like to know where this little teal came from. Just have a look. What a striking contrast between that dark, it's almost like a dark brown on the upper face covering the eyes, and then that beautiful red bull. Unusual color for the bushveld colors. So, doesn't look like there's much else. Oh, there we go. What is that? Yeah, that looks like a sandpiper. Maybe a wood sandpiper. Or a common sandpiper. Just picking off whatever's drifting towards the edge of the pan from the water. Looks like a wood sandpiper to me. From here, but yeah, what an interesting bird. It's literally going between these islands of old elephant dung, moving about, looking for whatever might be there. And it's such a beautiful little bird to have a good look at. It's actually interesting. You can see the yellowish color of the legs now quite clearly, which is something that normally with these little birds at this distance you don't really see. And then that quite prominent brow. And this is a visitor to the southern hemisphere this time of the year, so quite good to see it around. It's such a small little bird. They always look like, sometimes you almost feel sorry for them, hanging around these large watering holes with all the creatures, but they're quite adept and know their way around very well. Have a look, you can see anything floating on the water's top is catching its eyes. There's a lot of insects flying around. The moist elephant dung obviously provides food to some creatures, but also breeding grounds. So, and then I do have a few questions from Darkmane Lover, asking if there's any reason why most birds have very skinny legs. That's a good question, Dark Main Lover. They generally, I think it's also a matter of perspective. Like we do tend to see these creatures as having extremely skinny legs comparative to the rest of the body, but also like the feathers just makes up quite a bit of bulk, and the feathers obviously extending a little bit away from the body helps with insulation, trying to trap air. You can see that sandpiper was just trying to going after that fly. That's quite interesting to see. But so a little bit from their appearance, the feathers that cover the body makes them look slightly thicker set on the upper side than they are. Actually, if you have to remove the feathers or if they get wet, then you'll see they are quite scrawny. But also they've developed that way, their muscles and tendons have developed. It's an extension of the foot structures, so they've got extremely strong ligaments and a very light hollow bone structure, which that skinny legs aids them, takes away some of the unnecessary excess muscle or body mass. So birds' legs have just developed a little different. That was quite cool. And due to that, you often find that they got very strong, skinny legs. And it's only really there to aid them with when they're perched or when they're on the ground. But it's developed in such a way that it's lost the excess muscle while still providing a very sturdy ground and method of mobilization, especially for birds like waders. They're excellent flyers and they do cover large distances as they travel to their summer grounds and their winter breeding grounds. Kristen Hurd, you were saying what a beautiful bird. Now, I'm assuming you were referring to the red-billed teal earlier, and indeed a very, very beautiful bird. And quite a smallish duck, but extremely beautiful. And then we've got a new member, Johan O. Welcome to you. And you're saying that the teal is quite a nice surprise. I agree. I think it is quite a nice surprise, especially to have such a beautiful view of it. You can see both the teal and it looks like the sandpiper are currently foraging in the same area. What it's looking for there. Well, it's interesting to watch it filter through that green foam and often what you find also at the edge of these little pools like this, you find that there's a lot of smaller things that gather in there, often tadpoles, small fish, should there be insect larvae, insects that breed in the water. This is very interesting to watch, and still a beautiful bird from all angles. You see there's a dark stripe running down the bill, So I got a message earlier from Carla 2275, and Carla was saying hello to everybody, and that she was tuning in from Sydney, Australia, and that she's just catching a bit of the show before she heads off to bed. And indeed, it seems like everybody is having a good Monday this side. Now what's interesting is this bird mainly feeds on grasses and sometimes seeds. Now that's also another thing. I do know that all birds to some extent are insectivorish. They tend to pick it up in their diet regardless of whether they want to or not. To some extent, I guess one can argue. But in this case, like we can see here clearly, all of this algae and debris gets pushed towards this corner, probably due to the, I'm not sure what exactly that is, and if that might be an egg. Either an egg or a fungus of some sorts. If it is an egg, it's quite strange that it's left out on its own like this. Very, very interesting. Now, from what I understand, now I know these birds can be tricky to tell apart, the male and female, but I do think that there's a possibility this could be a female. I saw the black ridge right on the bill there. And it looks quite broad. Now, I'm no teal expert, but apparently with the females it is slightly broader than the male. And what's interesting is these birds do actually have very white eggs. So very, very interesting. But what I was talking about is like how sometimes we find that a lot of the seeds, the grass seeds and all kinds of other seeds of aquatic plants, they often get to drift in the water and they get pushed by the wind towards the edge of the water. So that might also be something that this bird is foraging for there. It's very, very quick movements, extremely quick. And it looks like the bills are opening and closing, but at a very rapid pace. Sure, what an interesting bird to see. I've seen some at Tau occasionally, I believe, if I remember correctly, but they're not something to see too often. Sometimes down in the Western Cape, where I originally come from, the areas around Cape Town, we do tend to find these guys all over, but this is quite unusual, especially in this type of habitat. You can see clearly there, it looks like it's a Mopani habitat, clay soils, some tall Mopani trees and that green Mopani belt in the background. But it's interesting now to see also, the last few times I saw elephant pan, it was first very dry still for a long time, and then suddenly quite a lot of water that's come in, and since then maybe some warm days obviously provides excellent conditions for this blue-green algae, as it's known, to start growing and show itself within the water. And we often find, especially if it's standing water in a smaller expanse or quite shallow, that it covers the water and the water becomes this greenish hue, and I think that's what we're seeing here. I've got a question from Ross. Ross is asking if birds feed on algae for extra nutrition. Ross, that's a good question. I think it depends probably on what type of algae. I don't know of any birds that feed on this blue-green algae, at least not that I'm aware of. I'm not sure of any other algae, and it's something that I'll have to have a bit of a look in. Over there it looks like we've got a ring-necked dove, or as it used to be known, a Cape turtle dove. A very beautiful bird, even though quite common. And just have a look at that expanse of Mopani wilderness. Whoa! So, I actually just had, talking about a Cape turtle dove, unfortunately, I just had a Cape turtle dove fly into the window near the room where I'm sitting. Thankfully, it wasn't too hard. The bird immediately flew away. But that was very unexpected. Gave me a bit of a fright, to be honest. Not something that happens here too often. Just have a look at that. Very difficult to spot game in this. Notoriously difficult, actually. The wall of green Mopani, a habitat that's notorious within the wild spaces of southern Africa, almost synonymous with the wild spaces of southern Africa. Also a habitat that I personally have a very personal connection to. It just looks wild. You get that ancient feeling. A tree that's very well adapted for the dry, more arid conditions of southern Africa, and you find them all around the upper kind of border of southern Africa, all throughout northern Namibia, Botswana, Zimbabwe, and then eastern South Africa and Mozambique in large patches. Very well adapted for these drier conditions. A tree that's quite water wise. and it holds very high nutritional levels of protein especially, but it's got very high tannin levels, which makes it difficult for the ruminants to always benefit from. However, the elephant, on the other hand, is very active in Mopani woodlands. Lady Macbeth, you are saying lots of birds won't start to brood till the whole clutch has been laid. And that is true indeed. That is true indeed. I think with the conditions here, it looks like it's humid and warm enough. Maybe, I know sometimes there might be quite a bit of intervals between different eggs. And then you're also saying a blanket hellos to everybody on the show this afternoon. Thank you for that. And then CER50, you were saying that the bird's quite persistent. It looks like it. I guess birds in general are, and they also have to be, exerting massive amounts of energy to sustain flight, and in general puts them as a creature with a very, very high metabolic rate, and they do need to eat often. And for a bird like a duck, it mainly feeds off seeds and plant material, they need to eat quite a lot, I'm sure, to sustain themselves. And what do we have here? There we can see that's quite an interesting little bit of contrast between the different colors of the old dead leaves and the new light green leaves, and then the more established green leaves of the Mopani. So we can see each and every one of those small little shrubs there might actually be stemming from the roots of one of the taller ones in the middle. There's something running across the ground. It looked like a dwarf mongoose, if I had to take a guess. And that's often something, that little mongoose running through that gap now, that's a typical situation within a Mopani habitat. I often find that people tend to think that there's not a lot of animals or not a lot of life in Mopani woodlands, and it looks quite arid and vacant of biodiversity, but I find it's extremely biodiverse. The tree itself lends to hole nesting birds. You can see like that dead tree there. Now there's some bracket funguses that attack Mopani, and they often ensure. Oh, there we go. What do we have? Indeed, it looks like a dwarf mongoose. I wonder where the rest of them are. There we go. That is very, very interesting. Have a look. It's amazing how the elephant just gives this long-term sustenance for little, probably termites, other beetles and things inside there. That mongoose might be digging for some beetle grubs. Just have a look, he's digging. Now that elephant dung balls like that, they often hold moisture for quite long, and that moisture along with the already partly decayed plant material provides a perfect sustenance and breeding grounds for especially beetles amongst other insects. Sometimes you'll find that they're also filled with termites, feeding off the dead plant material. So these little guys, they know that very well, and they know, being excellent resourceful scavengers and hunters, and they don't leave any stone, or should I say elephant dung ball, unturned. Have a look. It looks like he's eating probably ants, I think, just like that from the surface, from the soil. Oh, there we go. Here's another one. Judging from the size difference there, it looks like this one is actually still a young one. These little groups would be spread out all over here, and that way they cover a larger area, and they constantly keep in contact through these little calls. It sounds almost bird-like, with bird-like chirps. Constantly on the lookout for potential threats, from snakes to birds of prey, which is often a huge and very, very serious threat to these guys on the ground, especially if they have their head down. And these Mopani woodlands are full of birds of prey, especially birds that can hide in the canopy of the trees and try and snatch whatever small little predators or other creatures might be around. Just have a look at that. Carefully covering the ground everywhere. It looks like there's quite a lot of food in these dung balls. You can see that little one's turning around and feasting there. Not sure what, possibly termites. It's amazing how well they blend in. You can see, and they're quite variable in their color depending on where you are. Sometimes they're very dark, sometimes they're a lighter brown color. And you see them in a fleeting glimpse crossing one of these open patches. You often wonder whether it's a rat that you saw or something else. Regarded as the smallest mammalian predator or carnivore in Africa. Not so sure. Think about some of the shrews, for instance. it's amazing that these old, you can see that the elephant dung is already washed out quite a bit, and it's in some state of decomposition. Oh, something gave it a fright, or maybe something lured it over. Oh, there we go. It saw one of its group members. Oh, with a nice, very juicy beetle, it seems like. That's a good reward for the hard work. It'll take a little effort to open, but inside will be some very, very sought after, very good beetle pulp as sustenance. That's interesting. This habitat, even though considered sometimes a little bit tough to see game, there's a lot of life in it, and very interesting to watch. And the more you watch, the more you see. But I think as these guys are continuing to forage amongst this Mopani landscape, we're going to head over to a completely different landscape at Tembe to check in this afternoon and see what the elephants are up to there. And just have a look at that. A big elephant bull standing facing us with his back and in no rush. Funny that you can see there's a little bit of disturbance coming from the water right in front. So that elephant is right there at the water inlet, even though the pan is very full due to the recent rains. What a beautiful, beautiful sight. I like these big elephant bulls. They're always so relaxed and they give this quite a calm feeling. So I got a comment earlier on from CER50 saying that the elephant pan was a very beautiful watering hole. Indeed it is. Elephant pan, I do enjoy watching elephant pan, just like I do Tembe. Tembe is one of my favorite, I'd say, even though it's difficult to choose and it depends on the time of the time and the day. But I do like Tembe Elephant Park. And for South Africa, it's got quite an otherworldly feel here in the sand forest of Tembe in Maputo land. And then we got a question from Bush Girl asking if all mongooses have the same claw shape and size. That's a good question. Bush Girl, it depends on what would be regarded as a mongoose. Like the family is quite large, and they do occupy different niches in different areas, so their foot structure does differ a little bit, and you get some of them with much longer claws than others, but all of them certainly do use their claws to a big extent, and in a big way it plays a vital role in them acquiring their food. Some of them actively hunt, some of them use it more so to dig and acquire more static prey species. And we had a question from Ben. Ben was asking if mongooses would kill each other's babies. Ben, that's a good question. I mean, normally with mongooses, those that do travel in groups, they have a breeding pair, and then they have all the other related mongooses, and often you'll find that young males might come in from other groups and join, and then they have to work their way up through a lot of effort within the ranks. But I wouldn't put it beneath them. I think in extreme cases where you do have an overlap in territory or potential encounter, then mongooses might fight, and they might even kill some of the others' babies. And then Erica Oldno, welcome. I see you said you just tuned in about 10 minutes ago. Thank you for joining us. I hope we'll have quite a exciting afternoon. It's been quite good, the birding. You can see here's another yellow-billed stork. He's moved on to the big pan now from yesterday. Not too bothered by this big elephant. Have a look, the elephant's just inspecting that patch there, kicking a bit, probably getting some water. And there we have a Nyala bull, looking very good. You can see he's been benefiting from this green tembe. And indeed, it's been exceptional change that we've witnessed throughout the southern African region. This part of the year is my favorite indeed, with the green. But while these animals are peacefully enjoying the greenery here at Tembe, I heard that there's some zebra at Lentore, and the baboons are still there, so we're going to head back over that side and check in again. And how beautiful is that? Unbelievably beautiful. You can see a herd of zebra. I think this is a first for me here at Lentore. Baboons are still sitting there in their same space as two big males, carefully utilizing the little bit of shade there. But beautiful to see some zebra here. They seem quite thirsty. And you can see the vigorous wagging of the tails. And these guys are often pestered by the biting flies, and that's why we saw that little kick there coming up from the one on the left to the belly, and then you can see the skin twitching constantly, almost in some cases. More so when it's warm or getting warmer. It's a nervous twitch that happens, involuntary, referred to as the panicular reflex. One of the ways that some animals do to utilize or have adapted to actually be able to help them manage the biting flies and the biting insects. Zebra especially gets pested by these. Very, very beautiful to see. So, from what I understand, these zebras are also plain zebras, which is quite interesting. The most numerous zebra throughout Africa. And with zebras there is also a lot of accredited or agreed upon subspecies within certain regions in the scientific community, and then there's also a lot of subspecies that's unofficially named. And from what I understand, these ones are plain zebra. Interesting to note the differences from the ones that I get to witness in the South African low veld. The ones down here mostly have quite a bit of shadow stripes in between. These ones have more pronounced, clear-cut black and white stripes. Very, very beautiful. Unlike the baboons are, oh, something gave, it looked like a young zebra, bit of a fright. Zebras tend to be quite nervous and very, very in tune to the behavior of the one next to them or near them. So what we find often with zebras, one spooked animal spooks a whole group as a knock-on effect, but they're very quick to react, quite agile. Ben's asking if there's any subspecies of the zebras that's endangered. So, from what I understand, Ben, there is quite a few. I do not actually know the exact status of all of them currently, but I know there are quite a few in some circles that are regarded as subspecies, and some of them, as far as I understand, is greve zebra and quite a large subspecies, and I know that their numbers have been reduced, not sure exactly of their status currently. Then in South Africa, we've got the mountain zebra, and this zebra is quite endangered from what I understand, only found in certain areas. Well, not endangered actually, or not quite endangered, I think they're vulnerable. but yeah, from what I understand, they are mainly found in southwestern Africa in the mountainous regions. Got an interesting looking subspecies. And then there's the plain zebra, which is doing quite well from what I understand, formerly known as virtual zebra. And then they also come with a lot of other different subspecies like Chapman zebra. There is Grant zebra. I think there's about 6 different subspecies of the plain zebra, which are all named after different people. And I'm not 100% sure of all of these zebras' different conservation statuses and what their numbers look like. I know some of them are regarded as subspecies because of the unique habitats that they occupy and are found in throughout Africa. It's quite an interesting topic actually. And yeah, Ben, so thanks for asking that question. It's something I would definitely need to do a bit of research on more, to know more. I know that there's some of the antelope species as well that have similar situations. But zebra in itself, because I tend to think often, at least even myself, before I knew and really started to look into these things, like I always thought that there is only one type of zebra really. I never really gave it too much thought. But yeah, they're very, very interesting creatures. An iconic species of Africa. It's something I should definitely know more about. Oh, look at that baboon up in the tree. That is the good life. He is scratching his belly, stretched out over that branch in the nook. Life could not be better. Yo, that looks comfortable. Comfortable, but at the same time a little bit uncomfortable. Baboon do have an awkward shape. Primates, of course, but still walking on their all fours, even though they can stand up, and they do often. Let's have a look. Here we've got an interesting situation. You can see there is a female grooming a big male. And then that other male was just following the female. Now from what I can see, it looks like it's mainly these 2 big males that's been around this area, at least now, for the last little while. And very likely 2 with very high ranks. There might be more. You can certainly see that they treat it as such. High-ranking baboons. Good respect. Mercedes Bean, good to hear from you. You saying, hey zebras. Yes, indeed, what a beautiful sight it's been. First for me here at Lentori, some zebras, usually smaller birds, baboons and some impala. So good to see some zebras around here. But just have a look at that baboon. That is It looks unbelievably good. You see another one sitting up high. I always have one or two up high. Okay. As relinquished his comfortable position. I guess the unique shape of that branch there just lent itself, it couldn't resist. But now what's interesting is it almost looks like right where that baboon was laying on that branch is some mud, maybe rubbings from a larger animal moving through, even though I've never seen any large mammals other than the zebra. Would be interesting, maybe elephant. Now I can see that baboon's hugging the tree very tightly there, and that branch provides excellent cover from the sun at the right angle, so it's utilizing the shade and of course with water flowing through the tree and going through the different layers of the inner bark. If it is in the cooler side and the shade, often that provides a little bit of relief from the heat. And that side of the tree tends to be cooler, with the bark being nice and cool, and I'm sure it being a very hot day out there, it will give this baboon a good relief on its cheeks. Rebecca Bishop, you asking how do you know the difference between different zebras? That's a good question. There's some species or subspecies it's quite easily differentiated, and then others not so much. I know that some of them have a different shape in their stripes, a different way they run across the body, and then they have differences in their manes and the shape of the faces. But to be honest, it is quite difficult in some regards, and I wouldn't be able to confidently tell the difference between all the different zebras. So I think it's something that comes with experience and having the chance to actually be able to see them. And to somewhat relatable to Rebecca Bishop's question, Lady Macbeth is asking if only plain zebras have shadow stripes, or she's saying only plain zebras have shadow stripes. That's also interesting. I did not know that. Well, to be honest, I don't know of any others that do, if I come to think about it. So very likely, regarding the fact that the plain zebra's got 6 or whatever different subspecies, that makes sense. Indeed, Catherine, wowzers. I agree. Quite an interesting, mind-blowing, for me at least, thinking of all the zebra and all the interesting things that I still don't know about a species that's so iconic and so often seen on safari. Interesting though, because I've often had people come and visit South Africa, and then you tend to think they see zebra everywhere and around every corner on occasions if the weather lends itself to it in the area, and then you get to a point where you almost kind of have to pay less attention to the zebra to try and get to see some of the other animals. It's more tricky to find. And then you get back to the zebra And then you realize that there's so much that you don't know about such an iconic species. And if people don't see them, like the giraffe in many ways, they'll definitely mention that at the end. And it's always something that pops up as a favorite to see. Personally, I enjoy seeing them, all of them. And I would like to see all the different subspecies of zebra. I see there is a comment from Catherine. And thanks for this, Catherine. I'm very happy that people are joining in on this conversation. Catherine is saying that Greve zebra is endangered and it's got big issues with inbreeding between the different species. And that is a very, very true point that you're raising there. And I think that is also very much the reason for the fact that there's not always an agreement upon the difference in species and subspecies within zebras, within the scientific community. I think it's very difficult to study this depending on the areas, like the terrain and obviously other surrounding political and environmental issues that might affect the chance to gather data and study different potential species properly. And of course, where they're not completely isolated geographically, inbreeding does make it even more difficult. So Jess, you're asking if monkeys and baboons have similar courtship displays. That is a good question. I think there might be general behaviors that in courtship displays that can be applied across the board for certain primates. However, I think each species is also unique in the way that they attract their mates. With the old world monkeys, the baboon type monkeys, like there are similarities in terms of the way they approach each other and the way that they exert dominance and show an interest in the opposite sex. But I think across the board there's some behaviors that's at the base that you can certainly apply to a whole bunch of them, and then there's others that's a little bit more unique to each species. One thing that is quite important is the social standing of an animal. That would affect its approachability and its access to the right to mate. But as you can see, sometimes, like that little baboon there on the right at the base of the tree now, you have one or two others without any real displays or courtship behavior. More more of a situation where it's like taking any available chance. But I always find it interesting in the heat of the day how much energy these young guys have. You can see like that now, playing a little bit of a game of what seems to be King of the Hill, up onto the nuke in the tree. So the first split, you often have them running up and down, pulling each other's tails, trying to get the other one out of that comfortable position. Wildlife lady, you're saying it's a tree-hugging baboon. Indeed it is. Tree-hugging baboons. And the tree-hugging certainly has a bit of a function. It is also a comfortability thing. And helps them with coping with the heat. Rocky, you saying it's just a lazy Monday at Live at the Watering Hole? Indeed it is today. It is quite a lazy Monday, as you can see. That baboon certainly takes it very easy. Look how full the one in front of him's cheeks are. Not sure what he might be feeding off. But life is good around the watering hole here at Lentore. Johan O, you are saying, you asking if this is the same baboon species as in South Africa. So South Africa, we have the Cape or the Chakma baboon, where these baboons, as far as I know, in this part around Lentore is olive baboons, although they look very similar to the Chakma baboons down in South Africa. They are different. And also due to regional variation or geographical variation. Look at the size of that baboon. That is a huge baboon. You can see that is a smaller baboon, very much making sure that he climbs the ranks no matter what. Winning some favor there with a very interesting move. But I find this one sitting at the water's edge hilarious. His cheeks are so full, bulging with whatever he's chewing on. It's been sitting there for quite a while. There's some rough play in the background. It's funny how they can so easily mind their own business and then just get into playing with the rest of them. Picasso, you're asking, since we were talking about subspecies earlier, subspecies and species, you're asking how many subspecies of wildebeest there are. Yo, that is a very good question. I do not know. There is quite a few. Quite a few. I know that, for instance, the wildebeest making the big migration in East Africa, of course, is a different subspecies to the one we find down in South Africa. But indeed, there are various different subspecies. I do not know how many. Quite interesting that these basic questions about species with creatures that we commonly encounter, like the wildebeest and the zebra, I feel like I should know, but I don't. And I think it's because it's a little bit more complex than one might realize. Like with baboons, for instance, even though there is quite a lot of similarities with the baboons down in South Africa. They are regarded as different species. And Annabelle, you are asking if baboons are fussy about the water that they drink and the quality of it. Not from what I've seen too much. I do know they prefer the cleaner water, but generally pans that's pumped, watering hole like this, even though there might be some debris in it and something else, they still drink from it. I think, like a lot of mammals, they prefer to go to the cleaner water. I've never seen baboons just drinking from a random puddle or the water gathered in a mud wallow like you might sometimes see with other creatures. I know that they're certainly quite nervous of going down to drink. Maybe an instinctive fear of the crocodile or whatever else might be lurking in the water. You can see the way where this water is pumped. You can see it gives a little bit of a flow within the puddle, so all the debris from the tree and whatever else is flowing over to the left hand side. And it doesn't seem like it's... Ooh, what do we have there? That looked like another male baboon actually, approaching that male, that big male. I'm not sure exactly what it was doing there, probably a display of submission or trying to show, I don't know actually. I'm not sure exactly what I witnessed there. Maybe it was a female that was just not in heat. I didn't have a good look. You can see every now and again these big baboons. I saw them chasing another one just now, but I see these big ones are still yawning every now and again. And clearly showing off those big canines of theirs. Just a reminder to any other chancing younger, less worthy baboon male in the area. When you have the camera slightly zoomed out like that, you can see all the different insects flying in front of it. On a hot day we have so many flying critters around and we can't always see them on the camera. Oh. That was a sudden jump to Old Donyo. I think we might have had a bit of an issue there at Lentore, but no matter. This is spectacular. Look at these beautiful bull elephants. That is a spectacular elephant standing in the water there. Doing what elephants do best this time of the day, taking a drink and cooling themselves down. Just have a look at this. 4 elephant bulls around a watering hole, small pan, and all 4 of them have very decent sized tusks. What an incredible sight. Spectacular to see. I can see from all of these elephants it looked like there is quite a bit of fluid running from the temporal glands. Now, I'm not sure if all of these elephants are in must currently, or any of them, but I think chances are it's more than likely due to the heat and environmental factors at this point. Potentially the abundance of other elephant bulls in the area. Wildlife lady, you're saying it's wonderful to see these big bull elephants. Indeed it is. There's nothing like a big bull elephant. It is an incredible sight. It's arguably one of the most magnificent sights one can ever experience in Africa. Look at the size of that bull. And one of my favorite things is if you do turn around a corner somewhere and you have a big elephant like this walking down the road straight towards you. It is amazing to watch. You can see this bull, literally the embodiment of magnificent. And since we were talking about subspecies and different species, there are different gene pools within the African elephants that's regarded as vulnerable and that need to be managed quite carefully over the last few years. And it took quite a while. For a long time the forest elephant found in Africa's jungles were regarded as the same species but a subspecies. Only in relatively recent years we finally got accredited as its own species, which is quite interesting, especially for such a large mammal. And then what I saw recently, not too long ago, I saw an article. It was a brief article on the elephant genetic pool in Africa, and where due to habitat loss certain areas near the outskirts of the African jungles, where the elephant and where the African savanna elephant is this big magnificent bull is that we're seeing now, where their range overlaps with the forest elephants, we find that there's some inbreeding. At least this is what researchers have found from some genetic tests that they've started in certain areas. It's amazing how complicated the occurrence of certain gene pools within certain species are. It's also a reminder of how important it is in the world that we live in today to manage these gene pools effectively, especially in areas that's intensively managed, like some of the areas in and around South Africa, areas where animals are getting reintroduced. It's important to make sure that you've got a wide selection and a very, very strong, or a very strong, a source from a very strong gene pool. Managing metapopulations. Through the management and acquiring of certain animals from different gene pools spread out across different areas in Africa. It's a very, very, very important topic in conservation today, and a very it's a very publicized topic in the media as well, with a lot of massive, large-scale shifts and moves of animals into areas which they formerly occupied. And as more and more spaces within Africa are getting conserved or getting protected as conservation areas, one of the ways to give these areas value, of course, is to have tourism, and of course that would mean having or providing the tourists the chance to see certain animals. But also restoring certain habitats through bringing in animals that formerly weren't found there anymore. And one can imagine, of course, it's not an easy thing moving an elephant, let alone a group of elephants. Only really in recent years where large-scale movements have become slightly more manageable. It's only with the advancements in the technology of today, and of course with experience gained. Now we look at giraffe uneasily trotting around there, eagerly waiting her turn to come to the water's edge to have a drink. You can almost sense the impatientness in her, although this elephant bull does not seem like he might move off that quickly. Computer enthusiast, you are saying big, healthy elephants. Yes, indeed they are. They are massively big. This guy especially. You can see the confidence in his trunk, draped over his trunk like that. And it's providing him with a little bit of relaxation. He's just resting up. But what a big animal, in very good condition. And then we've got a very interesting question from Wesley. So Wesley's asking, does it happen that the tusks can be too big or hanging on the floor? Wesley, that's a good question, because indeed it can to an extent. Of course, elephants with big tusks, like the tusks gradually grow throughout their life, and then once they reach the end of their prime, which is usually after about 45 years of age, you find that these elephants tend to have a growth spurt. So that growth spurt, well, a growth spurt within their tusks, the growth of their tusks, and that usually is when an elephant that had larger than average tusks, they usually develop quite large tusks at that point, and that can effectively impact their health, that's for sure. The way they move, their periods of rest needed, all of that. But these animals are also amazing in that they've got extremely strong neck muscles, and if you look at this elephant we're seeing at the water's edge here, you can see the size of that head proportionally to the rest of the body, size of those tusks, and then you can see the shorter back legs, lower hip, and of course it's got very high, very strong shoulders and big strong front legs. That's of course where the weight of the animal's carried, so that provides sturdy ground for carrying and aiding in having those big neck muscles needed to carry the big skull with its heavy tusks. And of course that means that some elephants, they do tend to develop a little bit of issues, health issues later on. But I know in the Kruger Park, for instance, there were some elephants, large elephants, most of them which have passed away by now. There are some large elephants known as tuskers or emerging tuskers in the area currently. But some of the famous large ones that were known as the big tuskers of the Kruger Park, there were one or two of them which had very straight tusks, very straight heavy tusks, and they tend to develop some issues later on in life with carrying that weight. In fact, one actually famously was found standing upright, too weak to move about any further, with its tusks pegged into the ground. So yes, indeed, when the tusks are very heavy and these animals need to move, you do find that they tend to have more often rest periods. So yeah, just have a look at this guy. You can see he's holding his head quite high. A very healthy elephant this. He looks nice and mature. Now I don't think this guy in his life he would reach a point where his tusk would touch the ground. But I'm sure in the next few years it will develop into some spectacular tusks. So already quite impressive. Now, and I see CER50 is agreeing, also saying very impressive looking bull. I agree. I think it's a beautiful bull. Lady Macbeth, you saying that this bull's got swagger. Indeed, you can see he didn't even care one bit about that giraffe impatiently standing around to get a drink of water, while this guy can even afford wasting some water on the ground there, as we just saw. Have a look. He probably picked up on something because he looks like he's paying attention. The tip of that trunk is showing us that he's just sensing the air. Maybe that's a prompt for him to move. Now, Paul, you asking a question about conservation topics, and you're asking me what I find the most interesting out of it, or what's my favorite conservation topic. That's a good question, Paul. I think there's so many. I think the most interesting ones are the ones that's lesser talked about, in my opinion, and the ones that's also grouped in and amongst those are the ones that gets avoided. Certain topics that, whatever the reason might be, and these, of course, there's some overarching topics that affect all areas through Africa, through the world, but then also there's the more localized topics, and that's the beauty of conservation, and I guess any job, any endeavor that is and involves the environment is there's a lot of things that often just gets avoided, things that does not want to be talked about, and I think there should be some topics that should be brought to light. It's often things that's understood more on a level of just by practitioners and people working within the industry rather than the general public, more so, and often quite controversial topics that bring about an outcry through media. Media has obviously got a huge influence on conservation topics nowadays, and a very useful tool within conservation. Draws a lot of attention, brings in a lot of money due to social media presence, but I can't help but wonder sometimes if it brings attention to the right topics. Oh, well, looks like we lost Oldonyo, but we are in the Sabi Sands, and we've got what seems to be a little bit of a windy watering hole's edge with a African spoonbill to the left with its very interesting wading behavior, and a hardida which has now disappeared. There's a spoonbill. Looks quite comfortable. Very interesting to see how quickly that neck moves. Oh, I think it almost caught something there. And there's an Egyptian goose. Oh, and there is a African jacana. Used to see quite a few around Tembe, but I haven't seen that many around lately. Maybe moved off to other less busy watering holes in Tembe. There's a blacksmith lapwing. There's some of the usual customers around the water's edge. We'll just have a look at that beautifully green bush here in the Sabi Sands. This area, throughout the area, has been receiving quite a lot of good rain over the last few days. Ooh, there's a little bird on the water, possibly a little grebe. But the rain in this area is extremely necessary. There was a time throughout the season where people were fearing that we might not get enough rain this year, and we got very little, to be honest. At the start, started out slow, kept on being dry, and then extreme heat. So it's very good to see that the dams are filling up, the watering holes, the rivers. In fact, where I am just a little bit north of the Sabi Sand, more towards the central parts of the Kruger Park, in the Timavati Private Nature Reserve, we have had good rains, especially last night. And you can see the evidence of the good rains all around here. Now there's a nest up in that dead tree. I cannot see exactly what it is. It would be hard to call it. Oh, there we go. Maybe not. It looks like a red-billed buffalo weaver. It's moving about there. That's what I thought. A good safe spot to make the nest, especially this time of the year when it's water surrounding the base of the tree. So, while these birds are enjoying a quiet afternoon here in the Sabi Sands, we should head over to Olifants River, where I heard we've got some elephants. Look at that, 2 elephants in the same shade of this beautifully big sycamore fig, where the elephant that we saw here yesterday was standing. And what a beautiful, beautiful tree, that nice and green here at the Olifants River's bank. Of course, very fertile, this area. And as the name suggests, the Afrikaans word for elephant, olifant, is the Olifants River, referring to all the elephants found in and around the area. Historically, all throughout. It looks very hot there. The fact that there's always elephants under this currently, and we saw some impala coming in yesterday. I'm thinking that it's because this tree is dropping some of the figs on the ground, which the elephant's going after currently. You can see every now and again, you can see it's not taking, I can't see grass coming up. It looks like it's just the trunk going down and coming back up. Probably picking up individual fruit that's fallen down. Elephants do tend to, this time of the year, a lot of trees are fruiting currently, so you often find the elephants during the middle of the day feeding on the fallen fruit. Not just under the sycamore figs, but also, more famously, the marula tree. And not just elephants, other creatures as well, baboons, antelopes. But it's a good chance to utilize the shade for a well-deserved rest, middle of the day, as well as stocking up. Praise Ngozo Piri is asking, what can happen to make an elephant have one tusk, and does it affect its survival? So Praise, there is various things I think that can affect the elephant's, or have an elephant have one tusk. Although the answer is not that straightforward. I think it's a very good question, because one tends to think that all elephants have tusks, but there are some elephants that don't. And I know with the Asian elephants only the males have. In some cases, few females have. Where with African elephants in some areas, some females tend to have no tusks, or even bulls in some areas. And it also depends on a lot of things: the environment, the type of available minerals within the soils, and therefore the plant material and the grasses. And some elephants are born without tusks. I don't know if sometimes that might happen, that an elephant developed some sort of an ailment that might affect the growth of one tusk, and due to that you find that one tusk disappears or falls out at an early age, and then the elephant grow that way, in which case he would adapt. But sometimes what you also find is you find that elephants tend to break them off. Certain gene pools in certain areas bring about the occurrence of smaller tusked elephants, and that can potentially have weaker tusks. But also then elephants tend to fight each other, especially bull elephants. They can break a tusk. Sometimes they break it above the lip, where it looks like they've only got the one. Sometimes they can break only a tip. You often find tips of the tusks wherever you are, if you walk throughout the bush. And all of these can come about through various different occurrences and behaviors, like for instance fighting. Elephants can break their tusks through trying to debark trees. But yes, they adapt. They do adapt. Their tusks can be used as a tool in combination with their trunk, even on its own in some occasions. But the trunk often plays a vital role in it. And the other thing with that is they do tend to use their trunk as a tool. So with the trunk, that enables him to adapt quite easily to a broken tusk. Even though it might be painful for a little while, they'll get over it and then grow with it. And that tusk will grow back if there's still some of the root left, but it will take a long time, and often not within the elephant's lifespan, at least not back to the size it was previously. And I can see what seems like there's a big elephant moving off there in the distance on the opposite bank of a rather full Olifants River. What a spectacular sight. It was nice to have a look at this elephant under the branches of what seems to be a very, very big drooping jackalberry. Like the sycamore fig, the jackalberry is also quite a significant and well-known tree from this area, found along the major river courses. Not sure what that fallen over tree is. It looks like it's not that old, but it looks like it's been utilized by elephant. You can see some branches stripped. There's some broken branches on the ground, probably broken by the elephants and chewed. And that is something we sometimes see. Elephants do tend to cause a bit of havoc, or at least affect the vegetation in areas where their numbers are numerous. Testament to how important water provision and water in an area is, especially in the low veld of South Africa. Surface water is not always that abundant, so the provision of water should be carefully managed in combination with the natural occurring water sources like this river. And due to that, we tend to find that sometimes elephants, if there's a lot of water in an area, they might spend a lot of time there, and then they might change or alter the habitat slightly. Lenny, indeed, 2 hours go extremely fast, and I almost didn't realize it, but I see there's only 3 minutes left now. And what an incredible 2 hours it's been. Just look at that beautiful Olifants River. What a spectacularly beautiful scene to see. It's very full currently. All the other smaller rivers flowing into it. But look at those beautiful big sycamore figs on the banks of the river. Some islands, what a haven for wildlife. And we are very fortunate to be able to see it and have such a good rain season, to have this river like this, bringing in some very important alluvial deposits. Very necessary to this area. You can see the hills, the rising hills in the background. That this river had to carve its way through, and then eventually flows through the whole of the Kruger Park and joins up with the big Limpopo River in Mozambique, and then eventually travels all the way down to the Mozambican coast at an area known as Shai. Imagine taking a journey from one end to the other end of a river like this. But I would like to thank all our viewers for joining us this afternoon. It's been spectacular, and I hope to see you guys soon again. So from all of us here at Wild Earth, we'd like to bid you a good afternoon and enjoy the scene of the Olifants River for the last few seconds.